Hi everybody, this is Mr. Peterson, and I've decided to make a video to go over how we should checkmate when we have a king and a queen against your opponent's lone king. Now this is something that you know I've talked about in class, and I think this is a basic skill that everyone needs to master. And hopefully by having this video for you to refer back to, I'll give you a little way to practice and so you can see what the procedure should be. Alright, so let's start by talking about what not to do. Now, when you just have the king and the queen, you're going to have to back the opponent's king into the corner. You're going to have to jam him against the side or move him to the corner or something. You can't checkmate him in the middle of the board because he can always dance right around you. So this is actually, let me show you what I see very often here. In a position like this, perhaps a player will go and check with the queen h5, and which is a reasonable move. It's a check. It gets the queen close to the king, but king just kind of steps out of the way. The king never actually has to leave the center of the board, no matter how hard you try. The queen on her own can't force the king away. So the king steps out. Queen tries to get closer. It's another check. It's another check. Now they're trying to look for something different to do, so we'll come down here. King just stays in the middle of the board, no matter what you go. No matter where you go, it doesn't matter. Around and around. King can always just stay in the middle of the board, stay in these four squares. And as long as the king's there, you're not going to be able to checkmate him. So let's go back to the initial position here. Let's back way up. All right. So what should we do here? Well, what we should do is put the king in a box. And the way to do that is to remember that the queen has lines of force coming out of her. See, these are all squares that the queen controls, even from a long distance away. And these ones along the top and the side, think of those as the walls of the box. And what you want to do is you want to squeeze that box smaller and smaller and smaller until the king is trapped in the corner. So what was actually a much better first move is something like queen to f6. And here, again, you see the walls of the box. The king is stuck here. And the king has to move. He's got to go somewhere. He can't actually go to this square either, because these squares are controlled by the queen just the same. So where's he going to go? Well, he wants to stay as close to the middle of the board as possible. He knows that you're trying to get him pushed against the wall or into the corner. So he'll do something like this, down to e4. Now, what should you do here? This is a little bit tricky. And a way that some people say to remember it is that you want to keep the king and the queen separated by the shape of a knight. So something like this. The shape of a knight's leap, kind of up 2 and over 1. I kind of like to think of it as sliding down. So let's watch. He's going to slide down this way, and we're going to kind of slide back this way to g5. And again, you can see we are kind of a knight's leap apart. But the box is smaller now. And so what's the king going to do? Well, he's going to try to stay in the center if he can. All right? And so where should the queen go? Well, a good square is f5. Because again, the box is smaller now. And now the king is going to have to step out of the center. He's been trying to stay in those four squares in the center, but he can't do it any longer. So he's going to step down. And again, now what we're going to do is we're going to slide over this way, over to g4. Slide until the box gets smaller. And the king tries to stay as close to the center as he can, goes to d3, and we squeeze that box even smaller. f4. See how much smaller he is. It's just down here. Remember we came down to f6, how big the box was? Now the queen over here on f4 is causing real trouble. So the king, again, tries to keep out of the corner if he can, but he's got to back up a little bit, goes to someplace like c3. Queen just steps over, e4. Now we'll try to slide back down. The king's kind of trying to stay on these central files if he can, down to d2. Where should we go? Again, the king slid down. We're going to slide down too over here to f3. And it's getting very small in there. And this box, remember, this box is smaller than you might think because we have to take out these two squares too. So really the only squares that the king has to go to here are e1, c1, and c2. So we'll go to c2 because it's closer to the center. Black is trying to make this hard for white. So let's do that. And where should we go? e3, make the box smaller. He goes to b2. He's not ready to be trapped on the side. Queen goes to d3. And again, let's look at this box again. This box is very, very tiny now. If we count the queen's diagonal moves, king only has 4 squares left in this box. c1, a1, a2, and b2. Well, there's no real good choice here. No matter where he goes, he's going to be at the edge of the board. So the black king steps over to a2, let's say, and we make it smaller. And now this is a tiny, tiny box for black to be in. Because if we count these 2 squares again, black is trapped. He's only got 2 squares to go in. Now again, this is something, we're going to talk about this a little bit. We've talked about stalemate in this position. You have to give the black king at least 1 square to go to at any time until you're ready to checkmate him. This is a problem that happens from time to time. So here, if we kind of go back here, so talk about moving the queen to a3, or c3, excuse me. King steps down to the only square he can go to, b1, and queen slides down to d2. All right, now, again, let's take this square away from black. Black doesn't have that square. The only squares that black has, the only ones, are b1 and a1. And that's perfect. That's exactly where we want him to be. He can bounce back and forth between those 2 squares until we bring our king down to help out the queen. So he goes to a1. And we're going to dance our king down all the way from a8, coming down to this is the key square. They can't get right next to the black king, but he'll be close enough to help the queen swoop in for the kill. Now, the danger here, of course, and this happens in some games, is that having squeezed the box smaller and smaller, a lot of players are eager to make a move like this, c2, because they think, oh, the box is small, the king has 2 squares. But the king doesn't have 2 squares, the king has only 1 square because of this diagonal. So the problem is, in this position, it's a stalemate. This is a tie. You have this overwhelming force, but the black king, has nowhere to move to. So we need to be very aware of what's going on in this kind of square. Always make sure the king has 2 squares in the box. And then you can just leave your queen here until it's time. So now the queen's work is done for the moment. White's bouncing around. Black's bouncing around. White's going to bring his king down to b3. So let's watch this. Black king just bounces. Bounces. He's got nowhere to go. He's still in that box. And now, here we are. This is the key position. White actually has 3 checkmates from here. There's probably the most obvious one over here at b2, where the white king is guarding the white queen, and the white queen is attacking all of these squares. Every one. Black's got nowhere to go. Alternatively, white can slide down to d1, where the white king is guarding these squares, so black can't fly up that way, and the white queen is attacking all these squares. Black's got nowhere to go. White could also go to e1, so from d2 to e1, and it's the same thing, as these squares are guarded, and the queen is attacking these squares. In a position like this, though, a move that you kind of want to watch out for, this is another common stalemate position, is this. Because with the king in this square on b3, king again is guarding these 3 squares. The queen is attacking these squares. And that leaves black in a box of 1 square. So let's back up. Let's walk through this quickly. Let's watch. White keeps moving. White keeps moving. Makes the box smaller and smaller. When black slides down, white slides down, keeps him in a 2 square box, and then the black king bounces back and forth, the white king swoops in for the kill, and finally, checkmate. And you've learned how to checkmate with a king and a queen.